This is The World This Week, your weekly roundup of the latest international events and updates. This is me, Bhavana Casey. In this edition, we bring you the stories making headlines across the globe, from huge anti-government protests in Iran to high-level diplomatic meetings in Beijing and Japan, extreme weather events and remarkable cultural milestones. Let's start with the latest developments unfolding in Iran. The United States says Iran halted 800 executions of protesters under pressure from President Donald Trump, following warnings from Gulf allies that appear to restrain any U.S. military response. The crackdown comes amid some of the largest anti-government protests in Iran's history, sparked by widespread anger over political repression and economic hardship. Nationwide protests in Iran entered a third week, with demonstrators continuing to challenge the clerical leadership amid a severe government crackdown that has killed thousands, according to right groups and activists. The unrest, which began on December 20th, initially over economic grievances including soaring inflation, water shortages, and high unemployment, has evolved into widespread political dissent. The unrest has spread from Tehran to major cities and provinces, involving workers, students, and merchants. Iranian officials have responded with live ammunition, mass arrests, and forceful dispersals, while maintaining a near-total internet and communications blackout to stifle reporting and coordination among demonstrators. While the government has placed limited economic reforms, officials continue to label the protest as destabilizing efforts fueled by foreign powers. Meanwhile, the United Nations Security Council convened an emergency session at the request of the United States to discuss the escalating crisis, with diplomats warning of growing instability in the region. UN Assistant Secretary General Martha Pobe meanwhile warned that threats of military action against Iran, like those made by U.S. President Donald Trump, increase volatility in the protest-torn country.
We note with alarm various public statements suggesting possible military strikes on Iran. This external dimension adds volatility to an already combustible situation.
A small French military contingent has arrived in Greenland's capital Nuuk as part of wider European deployment involving several NATO countries. The move comes as tensions over Greenland intensify, with U.S. President Donald Trump continuing to press claims over the strategically important Arctic territory, which is part of Denmark.
Tensions between the United States and Denmark over Greenland intensified this week as European troops began arriving in the Arctic territory, highlighting rising strategic competition in the region. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen described the dispute with the US as a fundamental disagreement over Greenland's future, rejecting American proposals that Copenhagen says would undermine Danish sovereignty. The White House, however, said a January 14 meeting between US and Danish officials was productive and announced the creation of a high-level working group to continue technical discussions. Meanwhile, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, when asked about the deployment of European troops in Greenland, said it doesn't impact President Trump's goal of the acquisition of Greenland at all.
Well, to your first question on Greenland, I don't think troops in Europe impact the president's decision-making process, nor does it impact his goal of the acquisition of Greenland at all.
European Union leaders, including President Ursula von der Leyen, emphasized that cooperation with the US on Arctic security will continue despite disputes over Greenland, adding Greenland belongs to its people.
So first of all, Greenland belongs to its people. So it's up to Denmark and Greenland, and only to them, to decide on matters that are concerning Denmark and Greenland.
The dispute is now shaping broader NATO and Arctic security planning, with allied deployments and diplomatic efforts continuing as Washington and Copenhagen navigate a high-stakes geopolitical standoff.
Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado says she presented her Nobel Peace Prize medal to U.S. President Donald Trump at the White House as the crisis escalates at home following the U.S. capture of Nicolas Maduro. Her symbolic gesture came amid deep uncertainty over Venezuela's leadership and efforts to push for a democratic transition after Maduro's ouster.
Trump, who often speaks about his desire to be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, had expressed displeasure when it was given to Machado, and she decided to accept the honor last year. Machado said last week that she would share it with Trump, but the Nobel Committee later clarified that it was not transferable. Trump expressed his gratitude in a social media post, saying the move was a wonderful gesture of mutual respect. However, the US president has declined to endorse Machado as Venezuela's new leader, despite her movement claiming victory in 2024's widely contested elections. Trump has instead been dealing with the acting head of state in Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez, Maduro's former vice president. Meanwhile, interim President Delcy Rodriguez asserted her government is not afraid of diplomatic confrontation with the United States, signaling defiance even as Washington plays a central role in shaping the country's future. In Maduro's absence, Rodriguez delivered his State of the Nation address to Parliament and received loud applause. She also called for national unity to defend Venezuela's sovereignty on the diplomatic battlefield. Maduro and his wife Celia Flores were taken into U.S. custody and subsequently transported to the United States to face charges after the United States launched a large-scale military operation in the early hours of January 3.
Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has met Chinese President Xi Jinping in Beijing as both sides seek a trade deal and reset in relations after nearly a decade of strained ties.
Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney arrived in China on Wednesday, beginning a high-profile visit described by officials as consequential and historic, aimed at restoring Canada-China relations nearly a decade after they hit a low point. Carney met with Chinese President Xi Jinping in Beijing in what Ottawa views as an opportunity to reset ties and explore new economic opportunities, part of a broader strategy to reduce Canada's reliance on the United States, its largest trading partner. Following the meeting, Carney announced a landmark trade agreement with China to remove trade barriers and reduce tariffs.
China used to be the largest market for Canadian canola seed. We want to not just return to those levels, but to surpass them. And so I'm pleased today to announce that Canada and China have reached a preliminary but landmark trade agreement to remove trade barriers and reduce tariffs. By March the 1st, Canada expects that China will lower tariffs on Canadian canola seed to a combined rate of approximately 15%. And to help deliver the full potential of these partnerships and bring down costs for Canadians, Canada has agreed to allow up to 49,000 Chinese electric vehicles into the Canadian market, with the most favored nation tariff rate of 6.1%.
The visit follows comments by President Xi Jinping that relations between the two countries have undergone a turnaround since his meeting with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau at a summit last November. Canada-China relations soured sharply in 2018 after the arrest of a top Huawei executive, triggering diplomatic tension that persisted for years.
South Korean President Lee Jae-myung visited Japan for a high-level summit with Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi, where discussions focused on security, economic cooperation, and regional stability. However, the most memorable and vital moment came when the two leaders played drums together to K-pop music, symbolizing warmer Japan-South Korea relations and a renewed spirit of cooperation. Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi and South Korean President Lee Jae-myung concluded the first day of their high-level summit in Nara with an unexpected cultural diplomatic gesture. The two leaders played drums together to K-pop music, including BTS's Dynamite and Golden from the K-pop Demon Hunters, in a short session captured on video by the Japanese Prime Minister's office. The impromptu performance followed formal talks aimed at deepening cooperation on security, economic ties, and regional stability amid broader tensions in East Asia. Takaichi, an avid drummer and former college band musician, organized the session and guided Lee, who she said learned despite having little prior knowledge. Lee later described fulfilling a long-held dream of playing the drums, a symbolic moment of personal rapport between the two heads of the government. The drum session attracted significant international attention as a symbol of more cordial phase in Japan-South Korea relations, projecting a message of cultural connection alongside traditional policy negotiations. The leaders reaffirmed commitments to joint security cooperation, continued dialogue, and subtle diplomacy, with Takaichi expected to visit South Korea next as both capitals seek to navigate shared challenges, including North Korea's nuclear program and strategic competition involving China and the United States. As South Korean President Lee returned home from Japan, South Korea was shaken by a dramatic domestic development, with former President Yoon Suk-yeol sentenced to jail for 5 years. Yoon has been found guilty of abuse of power, falsifying documents, and obstructing justice over his failed 2024 attempt to impose martial law.
This is the first of the verdicts in 4 trials linked to Yoon's martial law decree. Although short-lived, the move triggered nationwide turmoil, sparking protests as MPs rushed to the National Assembly to overturn Yoon's decision. Friday's ruling offers clues as to how the rest of Yoon's trials could go. His string of charges range from abuse of power to campaign law violations. Prosecutors had sought a 10-year jail term for the charges in Friday's ruling. Both sides have 7 days to appeal. The most serious charge is insurrection, for which prosecutors have demanded the death penalty. The verdict in that trial is expected in February. Yoon denied the charges, arguing that the arrest warrant itself was invalid and that the letter of the law does not require him to consult every member of the cabinet before exercising emergency power. South Korea's courts often grant leniency when the accused accepts guilt or responsibility. However, prosecutors argue that Yoon's lack of remorse is grounds for an even more severe penalty.
Scientists say 2025 was the warmest year ever recorded, with global temperatures averaging 1.47 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, and the past 3 years breaching the Paris Agreement's 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold for the first time. Experts warn that the extreme heat will intensify, raising concerns as global climate targets slip further out of reach despite international pledges to curb emissions.
The planet sweltered through the 3rd warmest year on record last year, European scientists have said, and no relief from the heat is expected in 2026. The average global temperature was 1.47 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial level in 2025, making the last 11 years the warmest ever. Data released by the European Centre for Medium-Range Weather Forecasts showed on Wednesday. Last year was just 0.13 degrees Celsius cooler than 2024, the warmest year on record, and 0.01 degrees Celsius cooler than 2023, the second warmest, according to the Intergovernmental Weather Monitor. For the first time ever, the average temperature during 2023 to 2025 exceeded the 1.5 degrees Celsius limit set out in the Paris Agreement over 3 years. The UK Met Office said separately that its data also showed 2025 as the 3rd warmest year on record. Director General of European Centre for Medium-Range Weather Forecasts, Florian Papenberger, said heat waves are one of the biggest silent killers in our society and could get more extreme.
Very warm years, the warmest years on records. The last 3 average years are above the 1.5 degree, if you take the average of the last 3 years. So that's really the three key messages of that.
Heat waves are one of the biggest silent killers in our society, and we do see this fairly often, and these type of events could then get more extreme and therefore have a direct impact on particular vulnerable populations in that sense. It's just one of the examples.
Nearly 200 countries pledged to limit the long-term rise in global temperatures to 1.5 degrees Celsius, equivalent to 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit, at a landmark summit in Paris in 2015. But the planet's continued warming has left that goal in serious doubt. The US, the world's second biggest emitter of greenhouse gases, announced early last year that it would exit the Paris Accord in one of President Donald Trump's first acts in office. China, the world's top polluter, in September announced a target for cutting emissions outright for the first time, but the goal was widely panned by climate experts as inadequate. In October, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres said the planet would inevitably overshoot the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold, as he stressed the need for early warning systems to protect communities across the globe.
Sugary drinks and alcoholic beverages have become more affordable in many countries, undermining global efforts to curb non-communicable diseases, the World Health Organization says in two new reports released this week. According to WHO, sugary drinks became more affordable in 62 countries between 2022 and 2024, while beer became cheaper in 56 countries over the same period, as taxes failed to keep pace with inflation and economic growth. WHO's Director General Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said weak tax systems are allowing harmful products to remain cheap, while health systems are facing mounting financial pressure from preventable non-communicable diseases.
Today, we are publishing new reports on taxes on alcohol and sugary drinks. They show that in most countries, these taxes are too low to be effective, poorly designed, not adjusted regularly, and rarely aligned with public health objectives. As a result, alcohol and sugary drinks have become more affordable, even as the diseases and injuries associated with their consumption continue to place growing strain on health systems, families, and budgets.
The WHO's report saw that at least 116 countries tax some sugary drinks, but many high-sugar products such as sweetened milks, fruit juices, and ready-to-drink coffees are often exempted or lightly taxed. Likewise, 167 countries levy alcohol taxes, yet wine remains untaxed in at least 25 nations, and overall excise shares are too low to significantly impact price or consumption. Dr. Tedros also urged governments to raise and redesign taxes on sugary drinks and alcohol to reduce consumption and raise funds for health services. As part of its strategy, the WHO is promoting a 3x35 initiative aiming to increase the real prices of tobacco, alcohol, and sugary drinks by 2035 through stronger taxation policies. In a historic leap for Nepal's space ambitions, the nation's first fully student-developed satellite Munal was launched this week from India's Satish Dhawan Space Center. But the moment of triumph turned bittersweet as the mission suffered a critical failure mid-flight. The project still marks a significant step in Nepal's space science development.
At exactly 10:32 a.m. Nepal Standard Time on Monday, the Indian Space Research Organization's PSLV C-62 rocket soared into the skies from Sriharikota, carrying with it the hopes of a new generation of Nepali scientists.
2, 1, 0. S-139 motor and both strap-ons ignite.
Here's the pillar of
Lift
fire
off normal.
meets the
P1
canvas of blue.
tracking.
PSLV C-62 carrying the umbilical
P4
tower, a
tracking.
majestic liftoff.
Among the 16 payloads on board was Munal, a 1U CubeSat designed and built entirely by Nepali high school students. Developed over 2 years at the Space Systems Laboratory of Kathmandu University High School, the Munal project brought together 9 students from across Nepal under the mentorship of Antariksha Pratishthan Nepal, or the APN, and in collaboration with NAST and ISRO. Named after Nepal's national bird, the Munal satellite was built to monitor air quality and atmospheric data, aiming to support environmental research and STEM education. It was also a symbol of Nepal's growing capabilities in space technology. But just minutes after its launch, ISRO confirmed a third stage anomaly in the PSLV C-62 rocket.
We had attempted the PSLV C-62 EOS N1 mission. The PSLV vehicle is a 4-stage vehicle with 2 solid stages and 2 liquid stages. The performance of the vehicle close to the end of 3rd stage was as expected. Close to the end of the 3rd stage, we are seeing little more disturbance in the vehicle roll rates. and subsequently there is a deviation observed in the flight path. We are analyzing the data and we shall come back at the earliest.
The vehicle deviated from its intended trajectory, and all 16 satellites on board, including Munal, are now feared lost. This marks a significant moment in Nepal's space history. While the mission did not reach orbit, the achievement of building and launching a satellite entirely by Nepali students is unprecedented. Nepal's journey into space began with Nepali Sat-1, launched in 2019 under Japan's BIRDS 3 program. The satellite was built by Nepali engineers including Avas Maske and Hariram Shrestha in collaboration with an international team. In contrast, Munal is the first satellite developed entirely within Nepal by high school students using local resources and expertise. Despite Monday's setback, the Munal mission has already inspired a new generation of Nepali innovators. As the nation looks to the stars, this moment will be remembered not for its failure, but for its fearless first step.
Separated.
There's a confirmation from the range operations.
Snow and rime have covered the Tian Shan Mountains in northwest China's Xinjiang region, creating widespread frost and icy conditions. Wildlife are also seen foraging in the snow, while authorities cautioned hikers and travelers about the hazards. Snow and rime ice were recorded across the Tian Shan Mountains in northwest China's Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region over the past 2 days, according to local authorities and media reports. Dense rime covered trees in deep valleys of the mountain range as temperatures creating widespread frost conditions. Officials say the weather conditions and wildlife activity highlight the region's winter climate patterns and the ecological environment of the Tian Shan mountain area. They, however, warned that the icy conditions could pose risk to hikers and local transportation and urged caution in affected areas. Tourism officials say winter visits to the Tian Shan Mountains remain popular with safety measures in place for visitors. It is said the snow and frost provide important water sources for downstream ecosystems in Xinjiang. A traditional Afro-Brazilian festival was held in Ouro Preto, Brazil, with participants parading through the historic city to honor Catholic saints and Afro-Brazilian figures. The annual event blends Catholic and Afro-Brazilian traditions and is recognized as an important expression of the country's cultural and religious heritage. A traditional Afro-Brazilian religious festival took place in the historic city of Ouro Preto in Brazil as participants paraded through the streets singing and playing instruments to honor Catholic saints and Afro-Brazilian historical figures. The event honored the figures who were enslaved by the Portuguese during Brazil's colonial period. The festival, which blends Catholic practices with Afro-Brazilian cultural traditions, reflects the historical role of Black brotherhoods in preserving African identity and religious expression during slavery in Brazil. Local authorities say the procession took place without incident and attracted residents and visitors to the city's historic center. The festival is held annually and is recognized as an important expression of Afro-Brazilian cultural and religious heritage. Organizers say the event aims to preserve traditions passed down through generations. Well, that was a vibrant display of culture, history, and community, and this brings us to the end of this episode of The World This Week. We hope you enjoyed as much as we did bringing it to you. We shall see you again next week with a new episode. Also, do follow us on our website www.nepaltvworld.com and our social media handles as well as our YouTube channel. Till then, take care and bye-bye.